welcome to another episode of The Future Current. I'm your host, Sean Swentek. Today, I am joined by Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of Omnidian, Szylko. Ray, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show today. I'm excited to have a chat with you. Welcome.
Thanks, Sean, and props to pronouncing my name properly. That's the old Eastern European way. Nice job.
As a fellow whose name used to be Świętowski, I've got a little bit of experience in some of those Eastern Bloc pronunciations, so happy to jump in on that. Ray, you've been around since the beginning, 10 years at Omnidian. Omnidian was really built around a problem that some of the industry wasn't really talking about, really most of the industry. There was plenty of installations happening, but what happens to a solar asset after it's actually installed? There was this gap between deploying assets and then actually making sure they perform. Why did that gap exist, and why did it matter so much to you and the other founders?
Well, I'm going to answer your question, but I think more importantly, there's a question that you didn't ask that's missing, and it's why did we get here? Why are we here? So one of the challenges that people were not leveraging was technology to how to manage the performance of the system. Rather, all the capital, all the money was going in at the upfront installation. The solar industry was in a gold rush, focused on the sale and the install, the next fund formation. What happened then? The gap existed or was created because the incentives were totally front-end loaded. Clients were paid to build. Financiers were focused on the tax equity flip. And no one was talking about year 7, year 12, year 25, because solar has no moving parts. It just works, right? Wrong. The myth created a massive vacuum in accountability. It matters because solar isn't a passive product. It is a high performance power plant. So maybe to sum up what I just said, Sean, the myth. The industry assumed solar was set and forget. The reality, we focused on the wedding, the install, and forgot about the marriage, 25 years of operations. So why does this matter? An unmanaged asset, just like an unmanaged relationship, isn't just inefficient, it's a financial liability. We built Omnidian to be the accountability layer the industry ignored.
That is the first time hearing the marriage analogy, and could not be more accurate. So thank you for sharing that one. I love it. So that was the beginning 10 years ago for Omnidian, and this industry is decades old at this point, but it still continues to mature. And bringing it up to sort of modern day, there's been a lot of policy upheaval lately, the OBBBA, and a lot of shifting regulations. As a result of that, we're seeing bankruptcies and a lot of M&A activity in our industry. How did that post-install gap that you just mentioned, that you all identified early on, how did that sort of become the center of the storm we're seeing today?
So we're on this beautiful thing called the solar coaster. And the solar coaster often is driven by changes in legislation or incentives. And so it creates a boom bust scenario. Many people in the industry, me included, want to get away from having these incentives and rather have projects just compete on the simple economics that they are. Incentives are given to an industry in order to get scale. We've passed that scale point. We're ready now to put some of the incentives away. But because incentives still exist, as there's changes to incentives, that creates the storm. And that's the storm we're in right now. Between OBBBA or Big Bad Bill or however you want to call it, Big Beautiful Bill, that has really driven policy shifts. And you couple that with the rising interest rates that we're experiencing right now, the whole notion of setting and forgetting portfolios is gone. These portfolios are actually hemorrhaging value. And if you think about when companies go bankrupt or when M&A heats up, the industry finally realizes that unmanaged assets are actually a liability. So the portfolios currently up for sale are often underperforming, which creates an upside for the buyer if they understand the opportunity. The simple truth, these portfolios are underperforming because they lacked proactive oversight. So if I was to kind of think of what's happened, first I go, hey, the shift. We are moving from a growth at all cost to a yield at all cost error. And the impact of bankruptcies, while they leave these orphan systems, M&A sometimes creates Frankenstein portfolios with all these different hardware brands and everything else. What does Omnidian do? We provide the stabilization. We turn chaotic, distressed portfolios into predictable, bankable assets.
Last one's critical because you mentioned one of the words you said there is opportunity. And I'm hearing some, upwards of 30% of all large portfolios across residential and commercial in the US are either up for sale or being shopped. And so when, you're really the connector to the financial markets for us at Omnidian, and when you're talking to a financial partner, they come to you looking to either acquire or divest of a distressed portfolio, especially for the acquirer. What are the things they need to be looking at that they can't see on a spreadsheet? So like they might see the opportunity, but what are some of the risks that they're maybe not aware of that we really are helping them there?
I love that question. And we have a lot of happy clients who leverage us for advisory services because what happens when a financial partner looks at a spreadsheet, they see theoretical yields, a P90 estimate. When we look at a distressed portfolio, or any portfolio for that matter, we look at for what the data isn't telling them. For example, one of the gaps we would see is maintenance debt. We look at the history, for example, of no fault found truck rolls. If a portfolio has high O&M spend but stagnant performance, they aren't fixing the core problems. They're actually just chasing ghosts. So the component ghost map, we look at specific failure rates of inverter batches across different climates. For example, a spreadsheet won't tell you that a specific 2019 inverter model in Arizona is a ticking time bomb, but our data does. We look at system health decay. We look at for signs of systemic neglect, like cabling issues or connector mismatches, which are the leading causes of thermal events. These never show up on a P&L until the site goes dark or until that favorite thermal event happens. We've helped multiple clients unlock value in these portfolios by being a trusted partner and advisor.
You mentioned these advisory services, and Omnidian has been, in the process of sort of productizing these bespoke advisory services for these transaction participants for a while now. Because like you mentioned, it's not that we're just monitoring. We're not a monitoring only service. We're providing assurance around the ROI of these assets. So during a high stakes transaction, maybe you can think back to a recent one. What does that advisory relationship actually look like in practice? Like, what are you and the rest of the team bringing to the table that's so unique outside of the, sort of the mechanics of it that you just talked about?
Well, a lot of our, these portfolio sales or even our clients' partners, there's an IE report that's already created. And again, the value that Omnidian has is from all the data points that we're doing. And so in a high stakes transaction or advisory relationship isn't just about the report, for example, that was created by the IE. It's actually about de-risking the terminal value. We kind of provide the buy-side technical due diligence that translates technical jargon into financial outcomes. This relationship allows the acquirer or our partner to bid more aggressively on ugly portfolios because we have created a locked-in plan to turn them around. Said another way, we are the technical fiduciary. We don't just give the report, we give a remediation roadmap. We tell the investor what it costs to fix the portfolio, and then Omnidian's willing to guarantee the performance.
I really love that. You've been focusing a little bit on the buy side. What about the other side of that transaction? Is there value that Omnidian can bring to those folks who are divesting of a portfolio? And maybe it's not because of, any BK related risk. They're just looking to refocus their strategy. Is there a plug-in for Omnidian on the sell side as well?
Oh, I love that question, Sean. One of the reasons why, or one of the thesis that we had when we launched Omnidian was in order to get more capital into the market, you needed to have independent third-party servicers. So if you look at, whether it's mortgage, whether it's auto, whether it's credit card, the idea of third-party servicers exist. And why do they exist? So portfolios could be easily bought and sold, and you could have other entrants. And if you think about solar, there's really two risks that you're dealing with. It's performance risk and payment risk. And so when we started Omnidian, we initially focused strictly on the performance risk aspect of it. But what's happened, when we started the company 10 years ago, that was our thesis. An independent third-party provider would bring in other capital. It's been a little bit hit or miss. But what we've seen now is a lot of these investment funds have gotten to their life and they're looking to sell it, or these operators, they actually want to divest. And so if you would have a limited pool of buyers, if you just had someone who was a servicer, both technical performance and asset management come in. But if you have Omnidian attached to a sale, then you're opening up to a much larger capital markets universe of buyers.
The portfolio becomes more attractive because that buyer who may not have the necessary expertise in managing those assets has sort of a built-in partner to take care of that. Is that right?
Built in, yeah, they want to clip their coupons. They have their ROI targets. They don't want to stand up the operations. That's what our job is. We're there to support them.
You mentioned this earlier, for O&M providers who are sort of chasing ghosts on sites. A lot of O&M providers do just sort of, they focus on break fix, and they don't have the technology or the expertise to really get to the underlying issues. Omnidian has positioned itself in the market as this single source end-to-end asset management platform for both PV and BESS products. What is the importance of bringing really the financial side of this equation into view for our clients? What does it mean to not just think of performance in terms of kilowatts produced, but the financial impact of those assets?
Great question. Most O&M today is break fix. Someone calls, you send a truck. That's a cost center. By bringing the financial side into our ecosystem, we turn O&M into yield management. For our clients' bottom line, the break fix model is too slow. If an inverter is down for 3 weeks while you wait for a quote, you have lost your margin. By integrating the insurance and the guarantee layer, we align our profit with the owner's production, or our client's production. If the asset doesn't perform, we're willing to pay. That alignment alone is how you're able to scale distributed energy at speed the market demands. Or simply, if you don't link the mechanical fix to the financial outcome, the client loses margin every hour the sun is shining.
Well said. So 10 years in, Omnidian is now overseeing 3 gigawatts of assets. That's across residential and commercial and industrial. A huge asset count on the residential side, right? And smaller systems and larger up to 20 megawatt systems on the C&I side, everything distributed generation. I think we've really found a sweet spot when we identify clients who have the dollars and the desire to really grow from managing a handful of sites to hundreds or even thousands of sites. When you're talking to a developer and investor who is making that transition and growing really rapidly, what is it that we really advise them on that's going to break first in their asset management strategy? And how does having a single source platform like Omnidian help mitigate that risk?
When a client moves from 10 sites to 1,000 sites, the first thing that breaks is human attention. You cannot have a human monitoring 1,000 different dashboards. Looks pretty, but boy, the moment a human's looking at a dashboard, you're opening yourself up for failure. You need technology to manage that. What breaks next is the service chain. Regional providers get overwhelmed, that technicians become whoever is available. Our platform not only prevents false positives with intelligent alert suppression, we're also focused on the remote remediation. And we also use machine learning. We've been doing this for 10 years now to filter out all the noise like snow or passing clouds. And that becomes one single source of truth, replacing all the different logins, all the different screens or flipping screens, and providing a unified standard of care across our portfolio and for our clients.
Yeah. An AI powered tool, I think before AI was really cool. So
Yeah, we were in an AI we were an AI company before the AI was a term.
I'm going to add on a little follow up question because I think there's a topic near and dear to your heart that's adjacent here, and it's the idea of backup servicing. And so for our large investor clients and partners, they'll have a primary servicer for their assets, but there's a really important factor here of the idea of backup servicing. And I think Omnidian has some unique position here. Do you want to just share quickly for our audience, like how you think about backup servicing and the importance it has in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. And this almost goes back to there's two types of risk, performance risk and payment risk. And we're on the solar coaster as mentioned. So companies go, companies fail. And when we started, we were at the middle of the solar coaster and you had Sun Edison, Sungevity, American Solar Direct, a number of others that went bankrupt. And there was this notion of a transition manager, transition agent that would step in and, quote unquote, find a provider. And they kind of base that off of their knowledge of billing and collections. That tape is relatively easy, but that's payment risk management, not performance risk management. And so you need lots of data to effectively manage a solar system. And so during these transitions, we realized that data didn't exist. And unfortunately, then that really penalized, the investors who stood behind these developers who went bankrupt and their returns were hampered. So we actually worked with the investment community and helped develop, and I'd argue we were the first to market. Others are out there now on here's a backup servicing offering to manage performance risk. So when there is a bankruptcy, because the first thing actually starts happening. We've seen this. We've been involved in the SunPower bankruptcy, the Snowa bankruptcy, the PosiGen bankruptcy. It's all public. As these companies start to have their trouble, the first thing that happens, service activity stops because that's a cost center, as we kind of mentioned before. So now you have this deferred maintenance building up, which is then impacting the returns. Second, the next thing that starts to happen is that knowledge walks out the door because those people aren't worried about the survival of that company. They're worried about their own survival. And so the whole notion of backup servicing is making sure that one, the data is available pre any issue. Two, that it could be instantiated on whether it's our system or someone else's system. Three, that you're able to write a transition plan because there's a lot of elements within the operations that people don't know. And then four, you're able to test that transition plan to tell the investor, yes, if something unfortunately goes wrong with that developer, got your back. One of Omnidian's roles is to protect the capital of the investors. Remember, this is about ROI, and that's our job.
I love that you brought it back to ROI in the end. You mentioned earlier our purpose-built AI platform called Resolve has been around since the beginning. It's now been trained on over 500,000 asset years of data, which is like a crazy number when I think of it.
Actually, Sean, I saw that number, got a lot more than 500,000 years of data.
You know what? You tell me, how many asset years of data do you think we've ingested into the
We
system?
have over 1,000,000 years of asset data.
Wow. So when you and so double what I thought it might be. When you look across that massive data set, what patterns do you and our engineering and technology and product teams consistently see in those underperforming portfolios that our client, the owners of these assets, might be missing on their own if they didn't have this tool?
Simple answer, it goes back to your ROI. But the reality is there's a consistent pattern. And owners miss the slow bleed. Obviously, most owners notice when there's a total blackout. Almost every one of them miss the 3 to 5% degradation caused by potential induced degradation. For example, like subtle soiling, string level failures. If you think about these micro losses, which can be remediated just looking at our portfolio costs 3 gigawatts. That's millions of dollars in lost revenue for our clients. And so there's where we step in. Again, this is an ROI equation. Our job is to manage the performance because that means real dollars in return for our clients. And probably another way just to kind of think about like our platform. When we first launched Omnidian, the notion of leveraging technology to understand performance, we look at it from 3 ways. One, you're ingesting the actual performance from a site. Within that site, there's tons of fingerprints of data and anomalies within it that I've mentioned earlier, like the soiling, string level failures, etc. But then we also create a digital twin. And so now we see what the system is producing. By creating the digital twin, we actually overlay solar irradiance data. We find that to be a much more effective and cost-effective way to manage an asset versus using a barometer or something like that. And so we know what the system is producing, should be producing. And then lastly, what a client actually is looking at is what did their model say? What is it producing? We triangulate those 3 pieces of information in partnership with our clients. We make a recommended remediation strategy that's going to make sure that we're returning that site to the ROI that company has underwritten to.
And that underwritten ROI is critical to the client. And so we're asking them to place a lot of trust by us saying, we promise you your systems will perform this way because of our technology and our services and everything we bring. But there's another component on top of that, a performance guarantee, where you get reimbursed for potential energy loss at the year end for, any covered shortfalls. Not everyone in the industry offers that. And I know Omnidian's is a really aggressive number. How did you and the founders get comfortable bringing that to market, putting that skin in the game, and how does that change the dynamic for our clients?
We have confidence in our data. When you're able to analyze nearly half of all residential systems ever installed in the US, for example, you understand risk profiles better than anyone. We know the math better than the underwriters. What this does is it changes the dynamic and it really moves from being a vendor to a fiduciary partners. We allow our clients to stop worrying about uptime and start focusing on revenue certainty. At the end, it's an actuarial problem, and we understand where the risks reside, and we're comfortable in providing the performance guarantee.
This is going to be a big question, so I'm going to try to break it up into parts that are easy for you to hear and answer it one by one. But distributed generation has really grown over the years. It's no longer just single solar assets on homes or businesses. There's now large portfolios of ever larger assets that are getting older. There's community solar, which is really having a moment. And there's a lot of pieces of that, like subscriber management, that's really nuanced. Battery storage is rapidly growing in our space right now and connected quite often to these solar assets. So as distributed generation has become much more complex, much more geographically distributed, and there are older assets that might need repowering, what does it mean for Omnidian's approach to think of all these different aspects and be able to come to market and be able to solve for each for clients?
I love that question, but I'm going to really simplify my answer. So my role at Omnidian is our chief strategy officer, and it's to look forward to where I see the industry going and how ultimately Omnidian can serve the client base in the industry. So I think about the future in 2026 and beyond, and if I'm just to look out the next 10 years, I would say this decade will be defined by complexity and also integration. For storage and community solar, we are moving beyond just solar into complex multi-asset sites, whether managing batteries, which requires a completely different data set and activities, including cycling and data health and grid services optimization, or whether adding EV charging in support of our clients who are asking to bring that there. Omnidian's growth goals since the day that we've started the company holds true to today. Our vision is to be the operating system for the energy transition providing portfolio assurance globally. We want to ensure that every kilowatt hour promised is a kilowatt hour delivered. Our vision is we see a world where renewable energy is as bankable and predictable as a blue chip bond.
I love that. For folks who have been in this industry for a while and have watched Omnidian's trajectory, they were probably aware that for the initial part of our company's founding, we were really focused on technical asset management, on proactive monitoring, remote remediation, those aspects of O&M. As Omnidian has transitioned into offering full suite end-to-end asset management, so including financial asset management for both residential and commercial customers, for those who've never worked with a single source full suite asset management partner before, what is it that Omnidian can bring to the table that might surprise these customers?
I'd ask you to get one of our customers on to talk about that, Sean. But if I was to put words in the mouth of my clients, it's about the peace of mind that Omnidian delivers. It's by working with a trusted partner and knowing that we are aligned side by side with your performance and delivering that performance. It simplifies things. Now, those services that you mentioned, we don't necessarily offer all those services in-house. What we do is we have partnerships, and our job is to manage these partners. So I'm still giving the client one throat to choke, and that's me. It's my job then to make sure that we're managing the other partners.
Love that. Ray, you mentioned advancements you made across asset classes and technologies. You mentioned EV charging, battery storage, community solar. Omnidian has also grown geographically, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. Can you talk a little bit about the strategy behind that and maybe what you see for the future of geographic coverage from Omnidian?
For sure. And again, I'm going to take you back to the statement I said a moment ago because I think it's super important as we understand your question of growth. So, Omnidian's vision is to be the operating system for the energy transition, providing portfolio assurance globally. And so, as we looked at what markets were attractive, where do we go first? We found Australia. And we found Australia to be incredibly attractive. So, first, compared to the US, the penetration is closer to 40% on the residential side, where it's still sub 10%, across the US. Obviously, some markets are higher, but as a whole country, they're at 40% penetration. And even more incredible, the cost to install solar, whether commercial or residential, is less than $1 a watt. Here in the US on the utility side, we're about 235, 275. On residential, you're getting closer to 385, $4. And so there are things to be learned because they've crossed that chasm that the US hasn't done yet. And so if we want to be global, we went somewhere first where we thought, one, it had great economics for us to enter, laws, regulations, a lot of familiarity with how we operated here in the US. So Australia was a great first market for us to enter. But, we have a really great investor base and a really great customer base. And so we have investors, whether they're European utilities, European banks, South American conglomerates, companies within Asia, Asian banks. So within this, we are seeing a pull both from our investors and a pull from our competitors. One of the really neat things about when we opened up Australia is the client searched the globe and they said, we can't find anyone else doing what Omnidian does. So we're willing to try in Australia. So they did the search for us. Our investors have done the search for us. We are unique in what we do. And again, if I go back to, there's still that gold rush. There's all that money up front. People want to develop, people want to sell. It's still longer term. We've created that moat for ourselves. Our technology and our data help us understand that performance better than anyone and to deliver the ROI that our clients want.
I love that. One of the things I always hear you say about Australia is that you view it as a postcard from the future for the industry. And I love that term, and I don't know if you want to quickly like talk about what that means to you, but I think that I love the way you wrap it with that.
Well, I think, so, even if I'm like to look here in the US, like, the CAC or the cost of the customer acquisition is dramatically higher. The finance costs are dramatically higher. And why do you get that? It's because it's a new industry. You know, there is I'm going to steal actually one of our employees, and his name is John Latner. And John says, in the US, solar is sold. In Australia, solar is bought. And why is it bought? Because it's at a lower cost. You've taken out all the acquisition. So I could, yeah, as a residential, I could buy a 10,000. I could purchase a solar system on my house for less than $10,000 and have that operating. And when you have that, then all of a sudden you're like, that performance is super important to you because you just spent that 10,000 and it's evolved a bit, because they know, for example, that whole notion that 25 years, no moving parts, nothing breaks is wrong because the penetration is higher enough. So they need a company like Omnidian to not only monitor the performance of the asset, but also be available to remediate the performance of the asset.
It's just well said. Ray, obviously, your career speaks for itself. Your business and technology acumen is second to none. But one of the things I love the most about you is, like me, you are really focused on the human element in business and on the importance of culture and building a business around the humans that work there. I think that's kind of the special sauce about at Omnidian that probably doesn't get enough airtime because of the technology and the other things. And I know you're just coming out of the annual get together where all employees come together to celebrate the culture of OnMedia. Can you talk a little bit in your own words about the importance of culture and people to you?
So I love that question because the question that people ask me, like, what keeps you up at night? I always go back to our employees. And because it's our job, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we have a happy employee. If we have a happy employee, we're going to have a happy client. And that's shown through in whether it's our Google rating, which is a very easy public rating, or whether it's a CSAT score with our customers. But when Mark, Dave, and I started this, and then was at the time, it was with the help of our good friend Brad Davis, who became our other co-founder. You know, I've been at some great companies over my life, and I've been at some not some great companies. And what really determined the difference for me was culture. And you could go look, there's different stories and research that you can all find, but the one that I really kind of landed on, the number one factor to a company's success or a startup, success or failure, is its culture. And so Mark, Dave, and I defined what the values of the company should be before we even launched, because we knew our strategy would change. We knew there'd be ups and downs. But if we held true to the culture, which really at the core, happy employee leads to a happy client, if we could hold true to that with these fluctuations, we would maintain the culture and the willingness to figure out how to make a difference. So one of my, we've received a bunch of awards as a company, but probably the one that I hold most dear and most important, because this is totally employee driven. The state of Washington, does a annual survey about top companies to work for. And they reach out to the employees provide their answers, totally anonymous to us. Over the course of the last 8 years, we've been on that list every year as top 100 place to work for. I know multiple times we've been the number one company on that list, and that's all employee driven. That means we've created a culture that makes people want to be here. People make a choice to join. And so because they've made that choice to join, I want to make sure I reward them with a culture to be happy.
That's beautiful. And I think you have. All right. Last question. You are the chief strategy officer. You oversee the business development team. You're often on the cutting edge of what's next in the industry. If you put on your prognosticator cap and just dream a little bit. What does the future of renewable energy look like? What does the future of Omnidian look like? How do those things interplay? I mean, there's just so much. There's geothermal now, small modular nuclear. There, people are talking about space-based solar, like crazy stuff. But if you could keep it more simple, but what do you think the next 5, 10 years looks like for this industry, and what are you most excited about?
Well, it kind of goes back to I think this can be complex. You're going to have new technologies coming in, new ideas. AI is changing the game. What the visualization is, how do you remediate it. One of the things I'm very proud of is we are, technology driven service team, meaning we use technology to recognize a problem, and then we use our service. So it's just not the technology piece, it's connecting, it's doing the end to end. Not only do we find the problem, we fix the problem. Dave Kenny, our COO, always likes that. Very simplistic. Find problem, fix problem. And we're going to continue to need to find problem, fix problem, whatever asset we go to. We're going to need to make sure, there's all those that shiny new gold rush. There's going to be lots of money running to this idea or to that idea. Solar and space, fantastic. Guess what? It's a lot of money up front. At the end, though, it's still the performance of the asset that matters. And that's the part that we're focused on. So whether it's solar, whether it's storage, whether we get into EV, whether we get into geothermal, we're going to be focused on the renewable part. When we don't have intention of going in, nuclear, I don't have intention of going in. There's plenty of other companies out there doing just what they do fantastically. My niche is within renewable energy solar.
Love it. I really love the way you just summed up the value that Omnidian brings, pairing powerful technology with expert humans who just care more. And that's kind of the story at the bottom of it all. So I love that, Ray. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of The Future Current. My guest was Ray Szylko, Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of Omnidian. Thank you, Ray, so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. For all my listeners, I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sean. It's been fun.